Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Around the Interruption. We've got a little bit of a smaller cast today, so we'll get some more airtime for Brian and the Midwest Wonder. That is Jason. How are you guys, gentlemen?
I'm safe.
Just another day in paradise.
Right.
That's all we can ask for, right?
That's
All right.
right.
So we got some topics to get to, right? So we'll try to fly through them. Obviously, Brian knows I have opinions on this first topic, and that is the what is happening with football and college football in particular, right?
Right.
So the news broke this past week. The Pac-12 and the Big Ten are calling it quits till the spring, and ACC, SEC, and Big 12 they're going forward. All things planned. They've all released their schedules. So what are our thoughts on the canceling and the going ahead of some other conferences?
Has Ohio State officially moved to the SEC yet?
I leave that to the Midwest person.
No, I mean, so one thing I'll say is with some of these other conferences releasing their schedule, like I think the Big Ten technically released their schedule last week, right, and then just immediately folded. So I think that's more of, hey, we're just going to kind of continue to proceed as if something is happening and not really a sure commitment. I don't know. I mean, in some ways, I kind of feel like the hand is forced for the SEC and these other conferences. If half the leagues are shutting down, it feels a little foolish to be carrying out on your own in some sort of weird, illegitimate season. But obviously, the SEC takes football a little more seriously than the rest of the country. So maybe they'll just continue. You hear a lot of outspoken things from the players. Trevor Lawrence, most notably, with his little broadcast the other day, that I think a lot of people kind of bought into. And I think maybe another interesting wrinkle in all of this is the re-raising of the idea of players being paid and treated more like professional athletes, and in the intersection of that versus canceling the season. So, I'll shut my mouth for a second.
When somebody does get sick, in whatever division they're in or whatever, who do they sue? Is it the SEC? Is it the ACC? Do they just sue the NCAA? Do they sue? Because they want to go where the most money is, right? Typically, that's what people do when they sue. So who's liable? Even if, because is the conference voting themselves? Is it independent? Is it NCAA that says we defer to the conference? Who's getting sued if something goes wrong?
Well, alternatively, if you're a player, how do who are you suing for your lost wages for impacting your draft status or something like that? I assume that's what's ultimately top of mind for a lot of these guys, right? Of how does this impact my NFL future?
Well, I know for sure that the presidents of the individual universities, that was the first thing on their mind, right? So everyone's talking about it's not safe, it's not safe. No, it was the lawyer saying we can't get you off the hook if someone sues you if they get sick. That no matter what, that's basically what it was. So Brian, I think the easy answer to your question is each individual university is probably the one that would be first on the sue list. I'm sure there would be other people, individuals and conferences, but I think the universities themselves are first, right? So my big thing, as long as it means, because there's 5 Power 5 conferences, right? As long as it remains a majority is either yes or no, then this whole situation is just going to be a yes, but why, right? So if all of a sudden one of the 3 schools that are playing right now goes to the other side, then you have a majority that are canceling, and the other 2 basically I think will follow along. But as long as the majority is we continue to play, it's going to be very hard for those other conferences that didn't play, especially if the season goes off 95% successfully, to sit there and say we made the right choice. Now, logistically, money-wise, we'll never know, right? Because we can't retroactively look at that. But I think that's the first part. The second that really ticks me off as a Big Ten fan, obviously, if you watch the show, you know I went to Penn State, and I don't hide the fact that I love that program, the school, whatever. I think the big shock was that the Big Ten and the Pac-12 were ready to come out, cancel their season, and legitimately cancel it. Right. Then you have all the players and the coaches and the ADs coming out and say, I want to play, I want to play, I want to play, which is great. I think they should use their voice. I have no problem with that. I think the reason there was no announcement that day, and I don't know if anyone else followed along, but there was a bunch of reports that they had canceled it, and then 2 hours later they reenacted those. But what I'm pretty sure happened was they were getting ready to announce it. Players and coaches said, I want to play, and I will try everything to play. They went back in the room, and according to reports, for the first time less than 12 hours before they made the official announcement, talked about a spring season.
Right.
And at that point, they made it a politically correct way to say, we're canceling the season by maybe moving it to the spring. I think the reason it was delayed 24 hours is because they had to find a way to make it seem like they actually cared instead of just canceling the season straight up.
Yeah, and they can't play in the spring anyway because some of those guys are, dual threats. And then something else I heard was a lot of kids are like, oh, well, we'll just all get redshirted. It's like, well, no, it's not how it works because you have incoming freshmen every year. So those kids are basically going to get screwed out of a year of, academics, which I'm sure they really give a shit about. But more really, it's the sports is what's really going to bother them. And I mean, we knew a couple kids, Matt. We did the graduation who were away at football camp practicing. Now, like Atwood, they're not playing UMass, right? But he was practicing already.
Yeah, so they were in the midst of practicing, and they canceled their season. I think it was the same night as graduation here.
Was it? Yeah, because he wasn't at graduation, but yet UMass is not playing. And then we had another girl going to Yale, right? She was at graduation because Yale had already canceled, right?
Yeah, Yale's canceled basically their whole schooling. Everything I'm pretty sure is remote for them.
Yeah.
But I think it's just sad, right? And I don't feel we need to get into the whole politics of the whole science of everything, but I think it's very forward and telling that in this disease that no one knows anything about, and here we are talking about schooling, we're talking about masks, we're talking about whatever you want to talk about. We have some of the best and brightest institutions in California and Duke and whatever university in these Power 5 schools, and yet they're still split on is it safe or is it not safe, and what's a plan to play football.
It really comes down to money, though, don't you think?
Which is why I thought they would play it regardless.
Yeah.
Like I thought, so a couple kids get sick. I didn't think they would actually show human side, if that makes sense, like a human element.
Yeah, I mean, I think the SEC, it's probably most of the talent in the country comes out of the SEC, so they're going to play no matter what. If those kids don't play football, they're not going to be world leaders. They're not going to be, movers and shakers. I mean, even the, intelligent ones end up like Charles Barkley on TV. I mean, academics in the SEC typically, is not a big thing outside of what Vanderbilt maybe. But, the other schools like a Penn State, if a kid goes to Penn State, you're like, okay, whatever, whatever have you. But the SEC is the most professional league, I think, out there as far as football goes. And they probably have the most to lose because they probably make the most money per game for football, where that's something a lot of people aren't thinking about too, is if you don't play football, not even the SEC schools, but the other schools, you're not going to have a fencing team. You're not going to have a rowing team. You're not going to have a girls downhill ski team. 99% of the money that these schools make is from football.
I mean, there's still only, at least at last check, I'm pretty sure there's only 9 schools in the country that make a profit. And that's solely, when you look at it, it's the top 9 schools in football. Yeah. It's the Alabama, it's the Ohio State, the Penn State, Michigan. Those are the only schools that make any money anyways. Yeah. So now all of a sudden you talk about taking away hundreds of millions of dollars. Yeah, if there's no sports for like a whole year, I don't know how there could ever be the same level of sports for decades even. And I know that's a big picture, but you're losing hundreds of millions of dollars, not just this year, but next year, and then even the year after.
We saw in the MLB draft, there was only 5 rounds, so typically it's 20. Minor league baseball as a whole is going to get cut in half, legitimately. And I don't know what that's going to do for other sports either.
Yeah. Before we move on, Jason, do you have any final college football thoughts?
I think the only other thing I'd throw out is that kind of similar to what we saw with baseball and their stumbles and getting off the blocks here, like the notion of just, at the midnight hour declaring like we'll do a spring season, it's kind of just delaying the decision, right? And the fact that this wasn't thought of ahead of time and discussed and really considered as an alternative, it makes you question like what has everyone been doing for the past few months, other than just like sitting around and hoping some good news came out and they didn't have to do anything about it, right? Like
like in Massachusetts, like, yeah, we're still gonna play. The season's gonna start September 14th. Everything will be fine by then.
Yeah. And that whole trend is pretty worrying. Whereas, alternatively, you see what basketball and hockey have done, and all jokes aside about the rink situation in the NHL right now, like those systems seem to be working pretty well. Whereas in baseball, you have the Cardinals who have played 6 games, and and another team in their division who has 18, and it's just like what gives guys like we probably could have done something different here, and that's kind of how I feel about the college football situation, is that people had some foresight, took this a little more seriously, we'd have a better outcome. And I don't know if that would have meant a fall season or everybody on board for spring, but something a little more decisive.
What's the deal with the Cleveland Indians too? They can't get their shit together. Like, hey, I want to go party. Like, who is it? Clevenger
and Clevenger.
What the hell is their problem? And Francona's been away because if you sneeze in front of the guy, he'll get sick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hey, I just want to say the Marlins still have the third best record in baseball. Just want to say, according to what they're saying. And I mean, the Cubbies have the best record, but you're a White Sox fan though, aren't you, Jason?
Yeah.
I have no association with any of those teams. Give me a break.
Fair enough.
It looks like a dump on the outside, but the White Sox park, if I was going to design a park, it looks just how I want it to look. It's real easy to get to. We had two ways to get there. It was great. Oh.
Yeah, it was like $10 for tickets.
Yeah.
I think I got to take a phone call, gentlemen. I apologize.
All right, no problem.
No worries.
So, Jason, being in Chicago, did you stay up all night to try and watch that Bruins game, or did you pack it in at some point?
What do you mean stay up all night to watch the Bruins game?
Well, because they were going to play.
Oh yeah, I mean, so I guess as a detour, I had the
you're an adult. You were working probably, right?
Well, I was working, and then I had the Columbus game on,
right?
And I was gonna go for a run, so I put I put some athletic clothes on at the first overtime, and I was like, oh, I'll just watch till the end of the game,
right?
And it just kept going and going, and 3 hours later, I was like, well, I guess I'll go right now, and I guess there's no Bruins game to watch.
Right.
And then the game was at 11 a.m. the next day or something. So I was like, I had going on in the background while I was working, but yeah, kind of screwed me up there. So.
Do you guys feel better that now, now it's for real, and now they're playing so much better than they were before, or is it tied 3-3 and you're like, what the hell is going on? This is a cluster. What's going on?
No, I mean, go ahead, Matt.
Oh, I was just saying, I fully admit, once it became the third period, that reminded me so much of last year's team where they couldn't get the puck out of their own zone, and Tuukka looked like he had no idea what to do with his life, and Bruins hit every single side of the crossbar. It reminded me completely of a normal Bruins season.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, I think when the round robin system was going on, it's easy to get worried, but it's also easy to kind of write off of this is a veteran team and they'll get their act together when it matters. It's not really a normal situation, and I don't know how they're approaching it. The Hurricanes are a pretty respectable team, so I don't feel bad about yesterday being a close game. And when it came down to it, you had the best line in the NHL, put together a pretty nice looking goal to get the W. So no real concerns right now. I think particularly given the scheduling situation with that game getting moved and now them playing a back-to-back, and I don't know what the plans are for tonight, but I know there was another back-to-back on the schedule of the series, and having Halak as like a pretty reasonable second option, I think really plays to their strengths and gives me some confidence in the rest of the series.
How much did the break in the season hurt their momentum, if at all?
Well, I mean, they were the best team in the NHL before it stopped, so that certainly hurts. On the other hand, I would say the hottest team going into the break was probably the Flyers, and clearly it didn't really impede them at all. And as far as the Bruins more specifically, they're an older team, and I would think that they would benefit some more than others in terms of getting some time off to recover, particularly after a long season preceding this.
Right.
I don't know. If you watch the first few games of the round robin, you'd say hurt them a lot. They look pretty terrible. Right. Now, not so much. So
I just look at last year as a missed opportunity, and now they do have some older players. I think the break helps some of the veterans, and I'm wondering, is this it for them? Like, if they don't do it this year, do you start to make some wholesale changes, or will they just roll the same team again next year?
I definitely think defensively you have to wonder. There's the kind of a old dinosaur back there that you have to wonder. But I think, like Jason said, it should help them in some ways because they still have the same talent. Obviously, they're not like an average team that got on a roll like the Flyers did. They're a good team. They have the best line in hockey. They have a pretty good second line if Krejci ever shows up, and they have a decent third line. And defensively, they're good. And Tuukka's a Vezina candidate, whether you believe that or not. He is. So they have a talented team. They just need to find their momentum.
And as far as we know, they're healthy.
Yeah. The other thing too, I would say, looking forward, like they have some some top tier talent on what I would call sweetheart contracts, right? Marshawn and Berge are playing well below their salary levels, and that makes stitching together a team a lot more palatable. Whereas you look at a team like Toronto, who, yeah, they paid through the nose for some top tier players, but they can't get the depth behind it. So yeah, even with Chara kind of aging out, frankly, he was last year too. He's not the guy we remember from 2011, 2013. He's still solid back there, and maybe that leads him to retirement. But the rest of the crew back there isn't anything to slouch at. McAvoy certainly come into his own. I don't want to say this is like a dynasty team, and hockey is certainly the most high variance in terms of results, but I still see them having a solid core for the next few years.
What's the excitement level like? I know, the Celtics, I don't think quite are at that level where they will definitely win a championship. I mean, I'd like them to. Delusionally, I think they can, but realistically, they're just not right there yet. But the Bruins seem to be on the doorstep. Why isn't there more excitement with this team? Is it just because it's not a football team? Is that really what it comes down to? I mean, if you get a team to win a championship, where's the excitement?
I think it's just right now it's because they didn't prove it. Like if they had gone and swept the 3 round robin games and had won them all 4-0 or 4-1 or something, I think this town would be all up and they'd be ready to go and everything. I think it's right now, especially with the weird timing of it, 11 o'clock games, even though we were all waiting to get sports back, maybe it's just because the playoffs are just starting. It hasn't really hit, right? The Sox suck. So baseball coming back, it really didn't matter. Basketball coming back, they look like a bunch of pickup games because there's no playoff intensity, right? I watched the first Lakers game and LeBron's basically taken the other 8 off because they clinched already, right? So I think it's just a combination of things. If they go through and they sweep Carolina and look good in it, I think it's right on. It's playoff hockey again. I think this town will get behind them, but I don't know.
And then is there a Zoom parade? How does that work?
We'll cross that bridge when we get there. Yeah.
Right.
I know, Brian, to move on to basketball, because I think we're getting towards the end here. There's one big part, and it was announced yesterday, that I want to get to at second, but we'll talk about the Celtics first, and I think you guys know what I'm talking about. But we'll talk about the Celtics first. A, any concern about them losing today? And B, what are their chances against the Sixers?
Taco Fall got to play today, so I was excited. I didn't even know they were playing at noon. I was shopping, and then I heard the pregame interview with what's his name there?
Brad.
Yeah, the 43-year-old coach or something. Like, whoa, shit, he's really young. I always think of him as older because I'm 40, but yeah, he's 43. But he did an interview today, and they were talking about how he kept deflecting the attention away from himself. But yeah, they played today. They were all right in stretches. It was a main red clause basically against the Wizards. And it's whoever had the ball at the end lost. They missed a couple shots. I think they lost by 6 points, but it was fun to watch because a lot of those guys that people really don't know about, I like watching. I'll watch the main Red Claws games, on YouTube or whatever, because it's fun. You get to see guys that were good college players who are almost there, and you see a couple rookies play. So it was a lot of fun to watch. But it really didn't mean anything because they had clinched it already. I know that I've been to games like that back when they had KG, where my wife would give me tickets. And they go, wow, the tickets are really cheap for this game. It's really close. And it's like, yeah, because they're out of it by then, or the game doesn't mean anything, But so it had that kind of feel to it. But it was nice to see a game during the day. But they're already ready. They're looking at the Sixers. They're looking at film of the Sixers, and not having Simmons, I think it really makes a big difference in that series.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be frank. I don't really care. I'd rather watch hockey, and and the Celtics aren't going to win the championship this year. So yeah, I mean, I'd tell you they're going to get by the Sixers, but I don't think that things are moving far past that point. So
I'm intrigued, right? So if Giannis keeps headbutting people, that makes the Bucks a little bit easier to get by, right? And you basically beat everyone else. I think the Sixers they already struggle enough because they have so much inside presence, and then you lose Simmons. Hell, maybe it helps them, right? And obviously, if they look better without him, Simmons is gone. That team's broken up. But if Tatum can play the way he's been playing as a true top 5 player, Kemba's looked good the last couple.
Kemba's actually healthy now, which is coming into this the break. You're like, he's still banged up. Like this is it almost sounded like a Chris Sale situation or a David Price situation where they're telling you one thing, but everybody knows another. But he actually looks pretty good. And if he only has to play 32 minutes because Tatum's putting up 30, that's a good problem to have. And you have Gordon Hayward put up 30 points, I think, in back-to-back games. But they're all playing great right now. And I think the thing with Milwaukee, they might have more talent, but they don't have maturity. Where Giannis reminds me of James right before he won his first championship. He's an amazing talent, and he has all the weapons he needs. He's got a great team. But I don't know if he just has like a mind fart, like when you're headbutting people, stupid stuff. I mean, like 5 years from now, he's going to be ridiculous. When he learns to shoot threes and things don't get to him, I mean, he's right there as far as talent. And it's just a matter of time before he puts it all together. I don't know if he's going to stay in Milwaukee, but he can go to he could go to the Lakers right now. He can go to any team. And all of a sudden, they'd be light years better than they are now.
I do think, though, that's one of those narratives people push around right up until it happens, right? And we could, Giannis could win the championship this year, and suddenly it's, he's a true veteran at this point. He's got his ring or whatever, and it could be this year, it could be next year. So I don't know. I'm just a little cautious in stretching that too far. I mean, similarly, like it's not like the Celtics are a super old team. I would say Jalen certainly takes on a little bit more of a veteran or leader presence than someone else's age. But
Tatum got hung out with Kobe, and he just shot long range jumpers, which kind of set him back a year.
That didn't work out.
Yeah, Jaylen Brown is playing a lot better, I think, this year than people expected. His defense is great. He's not, when he's jacking up threes, they're going in. Marcus Smart is making good plays, not dumb Marcus Smart plays. They're making good Marcus Smart plays. They were going to have a big hole at center, and Tice has been above average, which going into the season, I thought they were going to get just destroyed, not just against like actual dominant centers, but average centers. And average centers, he can hold his own. It's when they play Embiid, it's when they play Giannis, that's when they have trouble. But if those are only two teams you have to worry about, that's a good problem to have. But unfortunately, they're going to have to play the 76ers. They're going to have to play Toronto, who I think is probably the hottest team right now and the best actual basketball team they're going to play. I think Giannis is the best player, but I think Toronto, they're very well coached, and I think that they're a very good team. If they can get past Toronto, I think Toronto will be a harder matchup for them than Milwaukee. If they can get past Toronto, they're going to feel good. They're playing really good basketball if they get past Toronto. If they can get past Toronto, they have a shot against Milwaukee. If they play Toronto and they lose, they win the first game, kind of like how they won the first game against Milwaukee, and we're all excited, and then they get steamrolled. They didn't really make much progress from last season, but I think they're going to play Milwaukee and then probably maybe win in 7 games or lose in 7 games. But I mean, I'm a big Celtics fan. I'd like to see them at least get to the conference finals, and then after that, I think it's gravy at that point.
I think they probably match up pretty well against Toronto. Like, I think they were 2-1 against them during the regular season before, and then they beat them here in the bubble. And if they play the way they've been playing, especially with Toronto not having a true superstar and relying on their backcourt to do 90% of their scoring, I know Siakam is an emerging player and he's good, but if you let Smart and you let Brown not shut down Van Fleet and Lowry, and all of a sudden you say, okay, we're just going to rotate Hayward and Tatum and pick your defender on Siakam, I like the Celtics' chances there. And then you're just basically going one-on-one against Giannis. And as we saw in the first game, Giannis is unstoppable when he wants to be. But I'm intrigued. They have my interest at this stage more than the Bruins did at this stage.
It's worth watching at least. It's not like, oh, well, they're going to lose 4 games in a row. Mm-hmm. If you're putting money on it, you probably pick Milwaukee. But as a fan, I'd pick the Celtics.
So I want to move on here to the interesting league note that was passed around yesterday, that after the first round of the playoffs, players will be allowed 4 family members and longtime associated partners or friends. So first off, I want to give Stephen A. credit where credit is due. And basically, hours before this statement was released, he was asking for quote-unquote conjugal visits for the players to release some pent-up energy and allow them to perform at their best.
Gordon Hayward has the complete opposite. He has his game to share and his video games, and he doesn't have to see his wife or any of his kids, and he's played the best basketball he ever had since he's been on the Celtics. Figure that one out.
So here's my question, right? A, are you shocked it took this long? And B, how long until the bubble gets shut down because this gets horribly mistaken?
Jason, you lived in Atlanta for a little bit, didn't you? How good are the wings, actually? Is it worth leaving your house for during quarantine?
Gotta get that lemon pepper wet. Yeah, I mean, not too bad. No, I mean, I don't know. I mean, on a similar story coming out of the NFL today, You saw somebody on the Seahawks sneaking a young lady in wearing Seahawks gear into the hotel, and he was immediately cut. Hopefully that sort of stuff across pro sports starts to send the right message, and people keep things above boards. And I don't know, as far as I can tell, ever since that first little kerfuffle for the NBA, they've kept things in line, and people understand the circumstances. I think that's probably driven as much by the league as it is other players not wanting things getting screwed up and not wanting to get sick, frankly. So I don't know, with few enough teams at that juncture and people starting to take things seriously, I'd like to believe they keep it together and at least acknowledging, like, hey, we have a process to go about this, I think is the smart move, rather than pretending it's going to be a non-issue and letting it flare up. So
you have to quarantine for 3 days or something, and then enter the bubble. It's not just like you just show up. There's
yeah. I have cautious optimism about the situation.
So who it's going to be Drake? It's going to be Kevin Hart. Well, no, Kevin Hart is under 4'6", so he doesn't have to.
Yeah, he's under 32 inches. He can he can come in.
So wherever he wants.
Yeah.
Who else do you expect to see there, Matt?
Well, I mean, as long as the Sixers stay, and I'm pretty sure Kendall Jenner there. She's got Ben Simmons, Devin Booker,
Gucci Mane,
Kyle Kuzma. She's basically got a partner on each team.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how Kawhi Leonard and James Harden handle the situation.
Okay.
They like their extracurricular activities.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to see that front, but I think this either goes swimmingly and everything is fine and sets a precedent going forward, or this goes god-awfully wrong and ruins everything that every sport has tried.
So will you blame the Kardashians for the downfall of the NBA?
I mean, haven't people already? I feel like that's nothing new.
Matt, on a local note, have we heard anything about high school sports?
So as far as I know, everything's still on track. Obviously, school plans are due tomorrow to the Board of Education. So schools will have to release, are they doing full-time, hybrid, or fully remote? And obviously, if you're doing fully remote, you are not allowed to participate in high school sports. If you're doing hybrid or in person, you can. However, a lot of districts are still very concerned about the inter-district competition, and what if person A in one town gets someone sick, and then next thing you know, they went to this school, but they also have a younger brother or sister in that school. So if I was a betting man, I'm not putting my money on playing. As the person that covers them and enjoys watching them and enjoys supporting these kids, I want to see it for them, because I know how many of them missed out in the spring and in the fall of last year. And it's one of those things that how many kids, Brian, do we know? And Jason, I'm sure you know these kids too. Once you graduate high school, you never play that sport in any sort of competitive manner again, maybe out sort of IM. But for some of these kids, this could be their last ride, and you just don't want to see that taken away.
I know quite a few kids have already moved into Hampshire from Belmont Hill because their season was canceled very early.
Sure. Oh, I mean, I even had a bit of a reflection, 4 or 5 months ago at this point, where it's like, this is probably like the best time in my life to this point where this sort of thing could happen. Because, like, I don't know, if I was 13 years old and you told me I couldn't play baseball for a summer, I'd lose my mind.
It'd be pretty colorful. There'll be a lot of F words involved. Jason and his anger management issues. They made a movie about him. Jack Nicholson. It was pretty bad. It was a TBS show for one season, but yeah. But you're absolutely right. I don't know. My girls are really young, so they don't really get it. But I know my daughter. She'll be 3 soon. She has to wear a mask to go out to eat. And she was okay with it, but she doesn't quite get it. But if she sees mommy or daddy do it, maybe she'll do it. But as a high school kid, it'd drive me nuts. If I was a senior this year playing football and I couldn't play, and I knew I was, I wasn't a great athlete as a kid, and if you took any years of my baseball career away because I didn't get to play, later on, I would have been very disappointed. I know how we think about now. Jason, in Chicago, what do people think about COVID and everything? What's the general attitude? Is it everybody wears masks everywhere you go? Is there confrontations? It's not a big deal? Does it depend on, north side, south side Chicago? Like, what do you see when you travel? Because you also travel too as well. So is it different here than there, or with the people you talk to, or is it pretty much the same everywhere you go?
Well, I'll say this: certainly things are conditioned a little bit by the social unrest in some ways. I'm not exactly going outside a whole lot, and I think a lot of other people are staying indoors as well.
Right.
But certainly, I will say this: in the more affluent areas of the city, as well as the more trafficked areas, it's pretty close to 100% mask usage. Even just outside walking around, people are being pretty diligent about things. But on the other hand, like there are certainly some areas where it's less so, and there are some flare-ups of people hanging out by the lake in pretty large parties without really abiding by rules in the sort of way that people want them to. I don't know. It's right on that nice edge of people want to be smart and also not have things taken away, but at the same time, like trying to make good of the 4 good months of the year out here in Chicago as far as weather goes and enjoy themselves. So.
And you traveled on airlines too recently too, right?
No, I haven't left the city at all, basically.
Okay.
So.
And then something else I want to get at, which I was kind of ticked about, but I'll have to make a change. I guess the gator things, the things that I like to wear. I think Matt has one on right now. So somebody somewhere said that they're 110% less effective. So I guess because you hold the germs on it, and then if you cough, they can spread. I don't know if I believe it or not, but I talked with somebody's initials who are RB that Matt and I work with, and he said that they might be banned later on in high school use. But I'm like, because they're just so much more comfortable than those other things. I sweat to death in those regular masks. These things that you just pull up, that's what I wear. But I mean, I don't know.
There are already
don't
some companies. There are already some companies that say if you walk in with one, you have to walk right back out. And
really,
there's some companies that if you work with them, you have to have an actual regular cotton mask or.
Oh, wow.
But at the same time, it's the same doctors that said that football is okay to happen down in the ACC country. So you can't believe them in some arguments and not believe them in others, right?
Yeah.
All right.
I think all we know is that we don't know much.
Exactly.
Before you guys go, there's one more question I want to ask. So the Rangers won the lottery, right, for the NHL?
Yeah.
Who's the number one pick supposedly? Somebody get like exemplary status in Canada? There's only been like 3 other guys.
Alexis Lafreniere.
Is he really ridiculous, or is it just all hype? Have you heard anything?
From what I've heard, he's supposed to be not as good as McDavid and Crosby, but that Austin Matthews level of like not 10 out of 10, but 9.9 out of 10 type thing.
Okay, what do you hear, Jason?
Oh, well, I was gonna say I don't know a ton about him other than he's gotten a lot of hype. I will also say that comparatively, like when people get hyped up in hockey, I have a hard time thinking about people who haven't really delivered. Like if I think about like the 5 most hyped up names in my life, it's been McDavid, it's been Taylor Hall, who's admittedly like maybe a little disappointing, but also had an MVP season at one point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Despite him getting moved around. Crosby, Ovechkin, like Malkin, like guys of this nature, things are pretty spot on when you're talking about that number 1 pick slot. So like I would say hockey's pretty reliable in that sense, and somebody who I think could probably make the transition pretty quickly and turn a team around. So
I just remember when you were a kid when Crosby was at that Lake Placid thing, or
he was playing up in Quebec.
Oh my God, Crosby is here, and he was a kid at the time, but it was, oh my God, you got to see this guy. And the only person I remember hype-wise that I can compare him to, hype-wise, not talent-wise, was Eric Lindros. He got hyped so much, and then he had, like 15 concussions, so it never really panned out. But, I mean, at the time, before he even played professional hockey, it was like, he's the second coming.
And I will say also that along with the top pick, the second pick, supposedly, Quentin Byfield, I think that's his name, might be the highest ever drafted black player in NHL history. So that could be kind of something to look out, too.
And the Red Wings have the 4th pick. They get the shaft big time. They were awful this year. They lost. You know how many updates I got on my phone? Red Wings lost again. Red Wings lost again. Red Wings lost again. Hey, Red Wings lost again. I think they lost twice in one day. I don't know how that's possible.
Hey, things happen, right?
Oh, it's beautiful.
They're not good.
They suck.
So I don't know about you guys. Oh God.
Yeah, well, they suck too. They're losing right now. What was it, 7-3 earlier? Oh, 10-5. 10-5. Okay.
Oh wow, they scored 5 runs. Good for them.
So we're gonna watch this guy Kumar Vanderbilt, number 1 pick. I've been watching him all day.
All right. Well, I'll trust you with a full scouting report. You can talk to your sources, Brian, next week, and we'll get a little 30-second scouting report. All right.
Hey, thanks, Jason, for joining us. I know you got a really busy schedule. What's going on there?
Just under the gun constantly.
Aren't we all?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, well, guys, Thank you for joining us around the interruption. Hopefully we'll be back next week. We'll get some more football talk, hopefully, with the week being a little bit closer. I might not be able to be here next Thursday. Brian, this is perfect timing, right? Live on air.
Well, we'll
but-
figure something out. I know Dan's not going to be here either. He's at a beach town on the Cape. I'll let you figure out where that is.
Okay. Well, guys, I appreciate it. And Brian, I guess it's time to spin that music, right?
All right, take care, guys. I'll see you later.
So.